For those of you who don't know, my name is Patrick Grover. I am the pastor for Children and Family Ministries here at the church. So this story has kind of a meaning for me, just understanding the relationship of parents and children. It's about a woman who, she was a single mother, struggled to make a better life for her 4 boys. And she scrimped and saved and she sacrificed and did everything, managed to get them through school, get them through college, and each of the 4 boys became successful in their own right. They doctors, lawyers, engineers, had a good profession. And one day they got together and they decided that her mother's 80th birthday was coming up and they wanted to do something really special to honor her. So they all decided they were going to get her some really elaborate gift. So the first brother said he was going to get her a beautiful house, large house, big palatial rooms, overlooks the river. She's going to love the view, all the rooms and places to mill about in her house. She'll have a great time there. Second brother said, I'm going to help with that. I'm going to put a $100,000 theater into that house. High definition screen, surround sound, all the amenities, comfortable chairs and everything. And she can watch her old movies. She can see videos of her grandkids and her great grandkids. She's going to love it. The third son said, I'm going to get her a new car. I'm going to buy her a Bentley. And she's going to have that luxurious car with all the bells and whistles. She could drive around town in all the comfort and just enjoy that. And for what it's worth, I'm sure she's going to really appreciate it. And the fourth brother was trying to be a little less conventional, and he'd done some research, and he discovered this parrot that had been trained by a number of specialized animal trainers, teaming up with a number of theologians. And for 7 years, they taught this parrot to recite the Bible. So this boy knew his mother loved to hear and read from the Bible, and this parrot was trained in a special way that all she had to do was say the reference, and the parrot would say it. She'd say, Psalm 23, the parrot would say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and so on and so forth. She said if she would love this, I'm paying $75,000 for this parrot. It's going to be wonderful. And so he got that for her, and it would be a little companion for her to have around the house. So they had the celebration. It was a great time and everything, and then they all went back to their houses. A couple weeks later, the mother wrote a thank you note to the brothers. And to the first brother, she said, I thank you for the house. It's wonderful. It's a big, beautiful house. But I really spend all my time just in about one room, and it's a lot of work to try to keep up with the property and the houses and keep it clean and everything. But thank you so much for the thought. To the second son, she said, the theater is wonderful, the seats are comfortable, but I'm not seeing too well these days, my hearing's going, and so movies really aren't something I enjoy a lot, but thank you for the gesture. To the third brother, she said, the car is lovely, but I really don't go out. I have my groceries delivered. I don't feel comfortable driving very much, and the car pretty much just sits in the garage, but it's lovely. Thank you anyway. And to the fourth boy, she said, I can really tell that you put some thought into this gift, and I truly appreciate it and thankful. The chicken was delicious. When we love and appreciate someone, when we understand the good things they do for us, they've done for us, it can be a very joyous experience to lavish gifts upon them, to give to them. Sometimes, though, the true value of a gift doesn't have much to do with the monetary cost. And I think in a scenario like this, the mother probably would have been blessed greater if she just had some more time with her sons. But nonetheless, it's a nice, enviable problem to have. I'd like to tell you another story about giving, and this one is true. And when I was in college, I was very involved serving at my church in youth ministry. And when I was coming up upon graduation, I was considering whether or not I should look into vocational ministry as an option for what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And the youth pastor of the church had come up and asked me if I wanted to come on staff as a youth ministry intern. And I said, sounds good, I'll go ahead and do it. And so I signed up, and I learned that they weren't going to pay me. And what I was going to do instead was something called raise support. And so what that meant was I was going to basically contact everyone I knew who had a job, ask them to give me money to whom they owed nothing, so that I could serve in a church where they would never attend and work with people they would probably never meet. It was kind of awkward, uncomfortable. It was a growing situation for me. And in honesty, I'm glad I did it. And by glad did, I mean past tense. Anyway, it was a mixed blessing and a blessing nonetheless. But I distinctly remember some of the responses that I got when I was contacting some of the people. And one of my friends I was calling up, and he just said flat out, "Pat, are you calling me just to ask for money?" Yeah. I didn't say that. I mean, it was more than that, but that was really the reason for the call. Another person said, while I was talking to her, she said, "Grover, I'd love to give money to you to help you in this." And very warm and enthusiastically. The same request for two people. One was an imposition, and the other, it was a joy. To one, they saw my request as an annoyance, and the other saw it as a chance to invest in someone and to impact lives. The difference was all in their attitudes. Now, if you're visiting with us today, I want to say welcome. Thank you for coming, and I'm sorry you picked this Sunday. This is our Pledge Sunday. We're going to be talking about giving, and it happens once a year. So please be patient with us. But if you really want to have more of a typical worship experience here at Westside, let me invite you to come back next week when Pastor Carl will be sharing a message about giving thanks. And depending on how today goes, we'll see how his message on giving thanks goes next week. But please don't feel any obligation to respond to any of the appeals we're making to give. And I do hope and pray that you are blessed here today with your experience here. Again, today is Pledge Sunday. Today I would like to look at 3 attitudes about giving. They come out of an experience of a widow who had very little to give and was asked to give to God. So we're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 17, starting at verse 7. If you've got your Bible or your phone, you can look at that, but it's on the screen, right? Yep. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zarephath. Help us with your support. We remain editorially independent, free from commercial bias, and our messages can be open and accessible to all. Imagine what we could achieve with the support of all of you. Together, we can be a force for change. Thank you. That's how Wikipedia does it. Anyway. So sometime later the brook dried up, there was no rain in the land, and the word of the Lord came to him being Elijah the prophet. Go at once to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." As she was going to get it, "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour and a jar with a little oil in a jug. And I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small cake of bread for me from what you have, and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land." This is the word of the Lord. Now, to put this in context, where this passage is taking place, I want to introduce some characters, what's going on in the greater context. We have the bad guy, the villain. This takes place during the divided kingdom, Judah to the south and Israel to the north, and Israel is under the reign of King Ahab. King Ahab is a bad guy. He's described in the Bible as the king who did more to provoke the anger of the Lord more than any other Israelite king before him. He was not a good guy. Among the things that he did wrong, he married this woman named Jezebel, the bad guy's wife. She brought Baal worship, an evil pagan religion, into Israel. Ahab began to worship Baal himself, and under their reign, Baal worship nearly supplanted completely Judaism in the land of Israel. One thing Baal worshippers believed is that Baal was the god of the sky. He's depicted by a symbol of the sun. But he had control of thunder and lightning and rain. And to demonstrate that Baal was a false god and the Lord was indeed the true and living God, the Lord sent Elijah to tell the king, the good guy, Elijah, there would be a drought that would last for 7 years. Ahab, it ain't going to rain. Talk to your God of rain about that, but the true God's going to make it quite arid for the next few years. After telling the king this news, the Lord directed Elijah to go take refuge in a ravine on the east side of the Jordan, far away, and one, to kind of keep him protected from, and he was taken care of there, but also sort of a symbolic removal of God's presence from the people. God was preserving Elijah. He was being refreshed by water from a brook, but the brook dried up. And at this point is when he tells, go to Zarephath and be there, and I have appointed the damsel in distress. We have the drought, and this widow in the land of Zarephath is here to take care of Elijah. Very unconventional. This woman has only enough left for one last meal. She's going to make some sticks to cook a fire, to make that bread that her and her son can have a last meal before they die of starvation. But Elijah tells her something, and he tells her, go do what you need to do. Make that last meal, but first, bring me a piece of bread, and then go take care of your needs. And this is the first attitude about giving that we see here is take care of your needs, but give to God first. And she was blessed because of it. That little word there, but first. Take care of yourself, but first give to God. Let me illustrate this, what it means. When I'm talking to couples who are getting engaged and they want to get married, oftentimes I will challenge them to set a financial goal. Something they do before they get married, that's something they can work on after they get married. Incidentally, by far above every other goal I've heard them ever say is paying off their credit card debt. It's the first one. And so they need to say, how much are you going to spend each month to reach that goal? And what you do is you take that, you set it aside, you take the money, you write a check for it, or you put it in a jar, stuff it in your mattress, set up a separate bank account, but set it apart. Then take care of your needs, pay your bills, gas your car up, get your groceries, whatever those are. Live your life, and at the end of the month, you have this money set aside to help with that. Because the tendency for us as people is we have what we have, and we go through the month, and we think we've got more than we have, and we get to the end of the month, and we find out we don't have as much left over than we thought, and what we needed to pay for our goal isn't there. The same is true with God. We need to take what we've chosen to offer to God, set it aside at the beginning, set aside for our needs, gas our car, buy our groceries, do those things, and at the end of the month, we have what we've set apart for God. That's the idea of giving to God first. It's the idea of the first fruits that God talks about when he was bringing the Israelites out of Egypt to give the first of their harvest. So we have that. Now, the widow's protesting the request made of her, and I don't blame her for that. Here is Elijah saying, got some water. She probably has a little extra water stored up, but then now I need some bread. She's like, look, all I've got's this. I don't have it. Have you seen what's happening here? It hasn't rained. There's a famine. There's nothing to eat. And I have to admit, it's not easy to give sometimes. I find myself to be quite selfish a lot of times with there's things I love to give to, but there's sometimes I'm like, well, you know what? I would love to give to your cause, but there's a sale down here over at the shop here, and they've got, or sometimes it's like, I want to do this, but I'm a little bit worried because I know I've got these bills coming in and I got these other things I have to take care of. Or sometimes, like the widow, I just don't feel like I have the bread. But the issue isn't so much of how much we have, it's how much we're willing to trust God. See, she obeyed. Elijah told her what to do, and out of faith she obeyed, and she was blessed. What did happen was they had a meal. They had bread every day until the drought had ended. And that ended in a spectacular way. When we see what was going on, when we look at the bigger picture, which I'll talk about in a moment. But this account's not primarily about the widow's offering, per se, the little loaf of bread. It's about her faith expressed in obedience. She obeyed God, and God worked through her obedience. Can you imagine if she didn't do that? Elijah comes up and goes, "Give me a loaf of bread." "No, I'm going to go over here, eat this, and die." And she's gone, and Elijah's here, and God's going to figure out another way to take care of him, but his plan was delayed because of someone's lack of faith. But she didn't. She did what was right, and it was great, and, got her name in the Bible. Well, in a good way, So the second principle of giving is that giving is a matter of faith expressed through obedience. It's a matter of faith expressed through obedience. One thing that helps me to step out in obedience on faith is to imagine the bigger picture of what's going on. Now, to look here what's happening is we see from this passage, here's just a little miracle going on. Here's 3 people who are being sustained miraculously by God with a little bit of bread each day that keeps replenishing itself supernaturally. But what's really happening here is Elijah is being prepared. There's a drought going on. God, for 3.5 years, has let this drought happen to make a statement to the people of Israel who are following a false god, to say, look, this is not the real God. He's the God of rain. Has it rained? And it's going to culminate in this conflict atop Mount Carmel, which is happening very shortly after this. It's the next event in the Bible, where, if you remember, Elijah is standing by himself as one prophet of God against 450 prophets of Baal. And the challenge is who can set on fire the sacrifice of this carcass of an animal. And the prophets of Baal try for a long time, and they're going nuts and acting really weird and stuff, and nothing happens. And Elijah takes the offering, and he completely saturates it in water. And then God sends fire down from heaven and incinerates it. The Israelites, who are faithful to God, are inspired, and they vanquish the 450 prophets of Baal, and Baal worship is virtually eliminated from the land at this point. So there's a bigger picture going on here. And when God calls us to step out in faith, it helps us to bear in mind that there may be something going on here more than what meets my eyes. I can't see the results of it, but God can, and he has a plan. So giving to God is an act of faith. To set aside some of our stuff does take faith, and faith means obeying and trusting God with the results. Just obeying God and trusting him with the results. And we pledge what we're going to set apart today. And in some ways, this is a very practical matter. It helps us know what our budget's going to be in the coming year so we can set goals for ministry and the like. Predict that a little bit better based on what's been pledged. But it's also a spiritual matter as well. If you ask someone, what about, to list off a spiritual discipline, what would you say? Someone might say, like prayer, Bible study, maybe worship, or maybe something like fasting. But giving probably wouldn't be the first couple ones on that list. It's kind of an outlier when we think about it. But there's an important thing here, that there's a spiritual nature that has to do with money. It's an extension of ourselves. It's a measure of our labor. For some of us, it could be a source of our identity or what defines our value as a person. How much money do I make? It's something that contends with our heart and our devotion. And how we choose to use it can have a tremendous impact on our spiritual lives. Jesus warned that we cannot serve both God and money. We can't have 2 masters. We'll love one or hate the other. Paul tells us that the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And there's one form of idolatry mentioned in the New Testament that has nothing to do with bowing down to little statues, and it's called greed. Is money bad? No, but it does have power on us. Let me explain. When I started, after I finished my stint doing youth ministry, I wasn't making very much, but I decided to enroll in seminary, and I found myself helping to pay for that. I got this job doing in-home sales of water filtration systems for houses. It was a very interesting job for a whole lot of reasons, good and bad. But my sales manager taught me the sales pitch and everything, and I went on my first night to do this. I went to the first house, and I was there for about 45 minutes and no sale. I went to the second house, and I walked out of there 45 minutes later. I had made my first sale, and I got this commission. And this commission was about 1/3 of what I would make in a month of full-time youth ministry at what I was doing previously. And I did this all in about 2 hours of work. And it was exhilarating. It was a huge rush. I was going, wow, that was easy money. I know now why people do illegal things. This was a legal job, by the way. It was up and up, just to be sure. But I could feel that. It was exhilarating. It was exciting. It was, oh, what a buzz. What a rush. And it was a little bit disturbing how powerful that was to have that. And I'm like, wow, this is really some tag here. And fortunately, the Lord in his mercy did not give me many more sales after that. And I had to move on to something else. But it was an interesting thing. Again, is money bad? No, it's a good thing. It makes life convenient. I like the fact that when I go to the store and I need milk and eggs, I can give the clerk a little piece of paper with a picture of a president on it instead of having to bring in a goat and a chicken to trade. I guess if I had a goat and a chicken, I wouldn't need to get eggs and milk, but you know what I mean. It's a tool he gives us, and we could do so much more because of this. But what I want to emphasize is that giving is not a matter of the pocketbook, it's a matter of the heart. It's a matter of where we are and where our heart is, there your treasure will be, Jesus says. Let me illustrate something here. I have a confession to make. I have spent a whole lot of money on little trains with grotesque faces on the front of them. One of them's named Thomas the train engine. He's got friends like Gordon and James and a number of other ones. And I would never have bought a Thomas the train, but when Kelly and Joshua, my two kids, were little kids, how their faces would light up when I came home with the newest Thomas the train, and we would just play with those for hours on the floor of their bedroom, and occasionally step on one in the middle of the night. But that's the pain I endure for my children. It's a delight. It was a delight to do that, to give those to them for what they were having. It was wonderful because of just to see their faces light up, and that gave me delight. And wouldn't it be wonderful that we could give to God with the same kind of delight? Now, the destitute woman gave, and she found out that as a response, the miracle of God, she wasn't so destitute. Her needs were met, and her situation was a tremendous blessing. Now, it doesn't mean that God's going to do a miracle if we give to him, but my life verse is Matthew 6:33, which Jesus is saying, don't worry about what you want, what you eat, what you'll sleep, your shelter and stuff, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. A promise of him to us that our needs will be met if we're faithful to God. Now, I'm not saying we should give to get, but we should give to give and leave the results to God. I'll tell you a story. There was a preacher who was doing this preaching gig, and he finished, and he hopped in the cab to get his ride back to the airport. And on the way to the airport, the cab got into a car accident, and both the cab driver and the preacher were killed. And they wind up in heaven. They're standing there at the pearly gates in St. Peter's checking them in. And the cab driver walks up, and Peter looks at him, and he looks at his list of things he's done, and he says, this is wonderful. Welcome to heaven. Here is your reward. And he gives him this beautiful golden crown encrusted with jewels. It's glimmering, it's shining, it's glorious. And the cab driver takes it, and he goes into heaven joyous and happy about everything. The preacher's looking at this guy going, this is what a cab driver got? I can't wait to see what my treasure is. And he walks up to Peter, and Peter gives him a straw hat. The preacher's taken back a little bit. He's like, what's going on here? I've served the Lord. I've been preaching and telling people about Jesus all my life. This guy's a cab driver. He gets a golden crown. I get a straw hat. What's up with that, Peter? And Peter goes, well, it's simple. It's a matter on the work you did here on earth. You see, when you did your job, people slept. When he did his job, people prayed. I'll put that verse up. In 2 Corinthians, it tells us that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due him for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. This is a promise to believers. This isn't about the big judgment between, are you saved or not? This is, you're all saved, but you're going to stand before Jesus and give an account for the work we've done, whether good or bad. In 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about it being a trial by fire. Things that are good or tested are things like are equated to things like gold and silver and precious jewels that will last through a fire. Things that are not acceptable are compared to wood, hay, and straw. And these things, of course, burn up. But no one will not be saved. Did I say that correctly? Everyone will be saved. But the works we're doing here. Now, again, what I'm talking about here is the spirit of our giving. It's interesting in that story that both the preacher and the cab driver were rewarded based on their incompetence. I know it's a joke, but it's funny how, sometimes our work can seem very wonderful and profound, and sometimes it may not be all that wonderful. Next slide. I want to just clarify what I mean by acceptable giving here. I'm not talking about monetary gifts, but whatever we give in service to the Lord. He gives us resources, whether they're monetary or physical, or our energy and time and toil and joyous giving. But I want to give 3 attitudes here about acceptable, or what makes it giving. And the first one is this, that love is your motive. I think we're all familiar with that great love passage from 1 Corinthians 13. If you've ever been to a wedding, you've probably heard it read. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. It does not envy. It's not self-seeking, not proud. It always protects, always perseveres, always endures. It's a beautiful passage, a beautiful explanation about what love is. But it's not taking place in the context of a wedding. In the passage in 1 Corinthians, it's in the middle of Paul's talking about spiritual gifts and how we serve one another with the gifts that God has given us. If someone's a great teacher and they could teach with grasping the profundities of heaven and earth and everything else, but they have not love, it doesn't mean much. It says if I have all my things and I give to the poor, but I have not love, it's nothing. If I sacrifice my body to the flames and have not love, it doesn't mean it's nothing. So the motive here is what we're doing. Are we doing it for love? And as I say this, I want to preface it too. Is that, we're never going to be perfect at all of this. How many of you have done everything out of pure love this week? Raise your hand. Okay. You two, I want to go to lunch with you, and you can be my friends because you're awesome. No, we don't. We fail and stuff, but it's something to strive for. It's an attitude we want to head toward. So love is our attitude. And then the second one we have here is faithfulness is your outlook. Faithfulness is your outlook. If we remember the story of the talents that Jesus has in Matthew 25, it's a parable he gives about a man who leaves on a journey, and he entrusts 3 of his servants with varying amounts of money, each according to their ability. So he's not giving these servants something they can't do. He's giving them something well within their skill set. And to one he gives 5 bags of gold. To another he gives 2 bags of gold. I'm saying that. Talents is what they use, but bags of gold. And then the third one he gives 1 bag of gold. And of course he goes on a journey, and when the man returns, he finds that the servant who was given 5 bags of gold has earned 5 more. The one who's earned 2 bags of gold has earned 2 more. And the one who earned 1 bag of gold went out and buried it because he's afraid of his master, so he decided he wouldn't try to do anything with it. Now, the 2 were rewarded for what they'd done, and the third one didn't get what he wanted. In fact, what he had was taken away and given to the one with 5, and he was condemned for what he was doing. But the idea here that Jesus is communicating isn't profit and loss or net gain. He's communicating faithfulness, to be busy doing what God wants us to be doing with what he's done. The 1 talent servant was cursed for doing nothing. And he said he should have at least just put it in the bank and earned some interest. See, God never intends for us to simply do nothing as believers. There are resources he entrusts us with that we're expected to be faithful with and to develop them. When we give to God, we are investing in kingdom work. It's something good. We can't always quantify that. We can't just look at it like a report on a mutual fund and go, it's earned this much interest. But when we do give to God, we are certainly not burying the treasure in the ground. We're doing something with it. So we have love as our motive, faithfulness is your outlook, and thirdly, God's glory is your goal. We see in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5 of Matthew that Jesus says, no one lights a lamp and then puts a basket over it. It's there so people can see what's going on. It lights them. And he says in that same passage, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So I have here is a flashlight. And I love flashlights. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it just goes back to childhood memories of pretending I'm playing with a laser beam and I'm blasting Space Invaders or something. But it's a cool tool, and this one's really nice. It's super bright. I won't shine it at you. But you notice what it does is it lights up everything it points at, but it never lights itself up. The darkest thing in the room when you're using a flashlight is your flashlight, and everything else is being illuminated by it. That's kind of, that analogy kind of works for me. As we talk about when we're trying to do things for God, to give God the glory, that's our goal with it. Now, it doesn't mean we don't deserve to get a little acknowledgement. If you put a lot of time and effort into something, it's nice to be acknowledged. I don't have a problem if, you get a name on a plaque for a donation you gave for a good cause. That's all good stuff. But what makes our giving sweet and wonderful is one of those aspects is when we are doing it for the glory of God. And that's the kind of stuff that brings blessing. We don't give to get, but God does bless faithfulness, and he uses what we do to give blessings. And blessings will come. Maybe not for us directly, but they certainly will come to others and things. So as we gather for Pledge Sunday today, I just want to mention a couple of things before I finish up here. If you're in your bulletin, you may notice that there's a little pledge card there, and so we just ask you to fill that out if you haven't filled it out already. And we're going to be dropping them in those baskets. There's a couple of wicker baskets in the back. Your pledge card can go in there. If you have a regular offering, you can put it in there. If you have your Connect card, we encourage you to fill that out. That helps us to connect with you and just to get to know you and vice versa. And you can drop that in there as well. It's all going in there. But those baskets will be taken by, there's only 2 people in the church who will see those pledge cards. And that's our 2 financial officers, the pastors. No one else on the staff will see those. It's completely anonymous except for those 2 people. So I just want you to know that whatever you do put on it, that's what will be going there. We'll do that at the end of the service as we head out for our collection. With that, I just want to leave you with this New Testament promise from 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 through 8. Whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each one should give what he's decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Let us pray. Lord God, you are the Lord of a cattle on 1,000 hills. You have whatever resource you need, and yet you entrust us with many wonderful things. May we be wise stewards. May we be faithful stewards. May we be stewards with cheerful hearts in the things you've given to us in our lives to serve you, to your glory, with faithfulness and love. In Jesus' name, amen.